Hey, if you're looking to form a band, or maybe you're just even thinking about it, you're going to want to know these 5 musts to forming a band. We're going to go in order, but the fifth one is really key to if your band is going to make it or break it in terms of even playing out. Okay. And this goes for if you're just working with 2 people, 3 people, you have a rock band, or maybe you have a large band with all kinds of other instruments like horn sections and things like that. It really goes for everything. And having a plan and knowing these are going to really reduce the amount of failure that could happen along the way. So, what are these 5 musts? Let's go through them. One is formation. We're going to talk about that. Then we're going to talk about the roles. What each person in the band, what's their role, and other people who are supporting the band. Logistics, setting things up, getting things ready. Commitment is another huge thing. A lot of people, they're loosey-goosey in terms of their commitment. They're one way one week, and maybe they feel something else. And expectations. These things all need to be discussed because when you're forming a band, a lot of people like grab their friends or grab people, hey, you got nothing else to do, let's just form a band. But then, most people, they just don't do a band just to hang out and play once in a while in their backyard or in the garage. They actually want to get out to a venue and actually play and maybe make a little money or just do it for fun, etc. So let's break these down. We're going to go to formation first, okay? So formation is just that. It's like, what is your situation going to look like? Is it going to be, small, medium, large, I guess, in terms of sizes? All right. So let's look at it. What's the style of music you want to do? Do you want to do country? You want to do rock country? Do you want to do pop? You're going to rap. What are you going to do? Are you going to do covers or originals? Or are you just going to mix it up? I've been in all kinds of situations where we've done originals and covers, just all covers, just all originals. It really depends, but you really need to hash out what that looks like. Okay. And I would encourage you to write some of these down. And again, I'm encouraging others to add stuff in the comments because I'm sure I'm not going to get every item to think about. But having this checklist and having this thought list is really going to be important. Okay. Again, what's the size? Some people say, well, I really like to have a keyboard, a drummer, a bass player. I want to have one of each instruments, or maybe I want to double up. What instruments and musicians you need? What does that really look like? Okay. A lot of people like 2 guitars. They like having a lead. They like having a rhythm. And one of the things you need to hash out if you do have 2 guitar players is who's going to be the lead? Are you guys going to trade off leads? Because that can be a big major headache down the road if you get 2 people who are constantly trying to be louder than the other or outdo one of the other. And who's going to sing? Sometimes 2 people can sing great. Does that mean they're going to trade off? What does that really mean? You need to hash that out in the beginning. So you know that person is going to be our front person. Or if there is no front person, you have the bass player singing, and the keyboard player wants to play once in a while. You need to hash all that out and get that squared away. Okay. So that's key. And we'll talk about that more in the roles section. And, this is something that's become more prevalent in the last few years, or actually, I should say maybe a decade or 2. Will the band use backing tracks or click tracks? So backing tracks, for people who don't know what that is if you're a band that doesn't have a keyboard player, but you want like some keys or some synth in there, you basically play along, almost like playing along with a record. You're just playing along with a recorded track. And click tracks are used for the drummer to keep in time so that you're syncing with the backing track correctly so it doesn't go off script and does something weird. So that's what backing tracks are. And a lot of bands use that now. A lot of rock bands use that. Some use it more than others. But you got to decide if you're going to do that because that's a huge setup. That's a whole different look and feel of your band. And, also, do you have any tuning considerations? There's some bands that, they play some songs E, some songs E flat. That might mean you might need to set up your songs differently, your set lists. You need to know if your singer, what they're comfortable and what tunings. There's tuning pedals. There's all kinds of stuff. But have that conversation. What's the tuning situation? Is there going to be anything like that? Now we're going to get into the roles, the second part of this, of the 5 musts. And these roles are huge because you want to avoid conflict, right? Where as much as possible. because, like as I mentioned with the guitar situation, you don't want somebody to be like, well, I really want to sing. You told me I could sing and now I can't sing at all because we have the front person, or I want to do some leads. You're always doing leads on guitar. You want to kind of keep away from that. And one of the first things is when you're talking about roles, who's selecting the songs? Is everyone chipping in and doing a song? Because a lot, you might have, is it a vote? Is it 4 out of 5 votes gets to do, where yes, we're doing a song, no, we're not doing a song. Who's making up the set list? That's, it sounds like a minor thing, but really isn't. People really argue over set lists. I've dealt with it in the past. One situation, it was given to just 2 people to do it. Worked out well. We gave it to the group. Some bands, some people don't care what the set list is, and there is some methodology to it. Maybe that's a whole other show for that just alone. But anyhow, you need to know like how you're going to do this, because again, you're trying to avoid conflict here, right? And you want to know, okay, well, who's in charge of these things like marketing? Who's in charge of getting the gigs? That's huge. A lot of people just want to play. They want to show them play. They don't want to deal with owners and promoters and all this junk. You know what I'm saying? They just want to go and play. And they want to know, okay, and who's collecting the money? Because you got to trust somebody that at the end of the show, you're going to be handed, a lot of cash. And sometimes you get extra money if you bring in more people at the bar. So if you told somebody, hey, we're going to get $1,000 for this gig, but you really got 1,200, you want somebody that will say, hey, man, we got 1,200, not pocket the extra 200. I've been in all situations. I won't go there. But, these are things to really think about, again, that can cause conflict. All right. And then outside of the performance, who's in charge of the marketing and the merchandise and social media? Do you guys have merchandise? Who's going to be in charge of like creating a logo? I don't have that on here, but you can add that to your list, like logos and banners and things like that. I don't even have that here, but that's specifically part of, merchandise and marketing and things like that. Social media, everybody should be a part of this. But controlling the sound, lighting, and if you have backing tracks, as I mentioned, you're going to need somebody that's going to need to do the backing tracks. So you got to keep in mind who's doing all the stuff. I mean, practice is one thing, but when you're out playing, you want somebody who knows what they're doing. And it might be some costs involved too, depending on who you have. And again, it depends on the size. Hence, you go back to the first of the formation and determine what kind of band you want to look at. You might be all professional and try to be really, really sharp, or you just want to be, basic cover band, just have a party band. 2 different things playing out for corporate events and being all sharp versus being a cover band, looking all drunk, playing for a party. So just saying. Okay, now we get into logistics, okay? Logistics meaning type of things like setup, things that outside of performance that need to be in place so you can have a good show. Okay. So, what's nice is that usually, not always, but sometimes you can find friends or people that can help. If you're a little bit, have some experience in bands, performing in bands. Like I've been in a band where we hired our PA sound person. So that was good, but friends. But a lot of times bands have to do it themselves, right? They have to set up the equipment themselves. But the first thing, even before playing out, you got to determine, do you guys even have enough equipment for practice? Let's say that for one first, because if you're at practice and you can't hear the microphone because you're playing out of this little dumpy speaker, you need to invest in a PA system. And, do you have enough equipment not only just for practice, for playing out? How about outside? That's a whole other thing. Playing inside versus playing outside is a whole other animal. And, do you have the equipment for these different situations? Okay. So, if you're going to play, in a lot of shows and you really want good sound and you just don't want to lug, a PA system can be huge. You might have to dish out. I'm not going to say, I don't know what today's rates are. But basically, I guess today you'd be paying anywhere from like $300 on up for somebody to come in and run the sound for you. But it varies depending on where you live, depending on the situation. But running your sound yourself can be a lot stressful and, very stressful. And you got to get there early. You got to set up. It's even more time. It's kind of nice if you could just bring your guitar and your amp, or just bring your drums, or just bring your bass and your bass amp, and not have to worry about all these monitors and speakers and taking the time to sound right. think about it if you really want to play out and look, be a little more professional, have a professional sound if you trust. Sorry to go on there, but that's an important part. Where are you going to practice? That is huge, people, because, some people can't be too loud where they're practicing. Some people have young kids that you can't be too loud. It's sometimes a problem. I was in a band where we actually rented space. We played out enough where we had a really, when I say cool, it was our own. It was a big practice space. It was an old factory, but it was just pretty cool. But, a lot of people can't afford that. So you need to find a basement or somewhere to play. Other performance considerations like lights and recording and video. If you want to do that, if you want to have some live recordings to sell later, or if you want to get some videos so you can put on social media, who's doing all the stuff? And I put who's printing out the set list. It sounds like a minor thing, but man, you'd be surprised. Imagine you show up to a gig and you're like, did anybody print out the set list? No. It's like nowadays with the phones, it's not as big of a deal. But that could be a big problem. I know it's silly, but I threw that in there because just from past history. So, commitment, huge. Okay, you got your formation, you got your logistics, you got your roles down. Now you're getting to the commitment
All right,
part
let's
of
talk
things,
about the
right?
blackboard. First
You
up,
want to know that
be on time.
everybody's on
Yeah,
the
that
same
means everyone. No more waiting
page,
around.
be on
And learning
time,
the
learn the
songs. You need to be
songs,
tight.
some of the
Agreed.
basic
Let's
stuff,
set practice
right?
goals. Sounds good?
Sounds like that's given, but it's not. So really determine how often do you practice. Is it once a week? It's once every 2 weeks. If you're a basic band starting out, if you're not these really professional bands, et cetera, so some people are so experienced, they literally don't need to practice. They can get up to the gig beforehand, just go through some keys and go through some things. And that's another thing too. If I just remembered, when you're picking your songs, make sure you understand. And when you look to pick the songs, make sure you understand what key you're playing it in, because that makes a huge difference. Anyhow, so how often you practice? There's some people that can practice once every 2 weeks, but they're learning 10 songs and they're prepared for 10 songs. Okay. So the commitment, how often are you willing, do you want to play out? Some people, they may have little kids. They may only be able to play out once a month. And that's going to drive other considerations for costs of PA system or hiring somebody. It's how often you play out, right? If you have a gig space, but really kneel down when you're going to practice, how often, and how often will you play out, and knowing where you're going to practice, as I talked about before. Okay. This may be a little small, but I'll read it. So how long does the band want to play for? How many breaks in between? This is another big deal. If you're a party band, it's a really bummer if you're taking 2 breaks. I'll just tell you right out. A lot of party bands will play one set in the beginning, take one 20-minute break, maybe a good break, but then play for almost 2 hours straight because they know people are coming later and they want to keep people on the dance floor. Okay. So if you're a rock band or you're playing a little bar, maybe 2 breaks is perfect. You have to determine based on the songs that too. You might have to stretch it. But you want to know how many songs in total is it going to need to play out. Time it. Make sure you're ready to go. Maybe have some extra songs. How many songs are you expected to learn between practices? As I mentioned before, that's huge. If you're practicing every week, telling somebody to learn 5 songs may be too much for people, especially if they have a job and other responsibilities. You might have to take it slower and only learn 2 songs a week, which means it could take you 6 months before you play out, which I'll get to the last one. I don't want to, talk about too soon, but these are things that are really, really important for planning. Okay. Before I get to the last one, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. Subscribe and share is huge. If you could do that, that'd be great. I have some AI artists that I've created, and it's a way for me, in terms of talking about working with a band and working musicians. Sometimes it's very hard when you have your own thoughts and what you want to create. So I use AI artists as my way to represent myself and put out what's on my mind and what I'm thinking about. So I have new music comes out every first of the month. The songs are important to me, but I also create some videos to help with the songs as far as visuals. So if you want to check the videos out, they're great. I'm constantly improving on that. The technology is constantly improving. So bear with me as those get better as time goes on. But thank you so much. So that's my quick little commercial. The last one is expectations. really huge here. So you got the commitment down, but the expectations of what your band is going to do, look like, and perform is huge. Yes, you need to be like ready to go and have the energy and all the given stuff. But here's the biggest one, and this kills. Oh man, this kills. Out of all the ones I mentioned, any one of those you can run into trouble, right? People not knowing their role, or not, are upset with their role, or nowhere to practice, or can't, not ready to practice their songs. They were told to learn 5 and they only learned 2 because nobody really set a hard commitment. But what is the target date you're going to start playing out? That is huge. If you want to be a garage band forever, go for it. But you guys should sit down. If you can't get a 3-hour gig to start with, get hired for like a private outdoor picnic or party where you're playing for an hour and learn like 15 to 16 songs and just play for an hour. At least get you a gig, even if you're only, make $100 and make $50 each or something. Start with something. Get your date, get out there and start playing. Because if you're saying, well, you need to know if we're in 40 songs, we're hoping, by summer, it's January, but by summer, I hope we're going to play. No. Set a date and set some goals. We're going to have one set list done in 3 months or 2 months. You need to get out there and start playing. If you don't, your group is doomed. So you got to have that start date. You got to have the expectation set out there. And this is the biggest. I've been in different bands where it just kind of fizzle out because we didn't have this. And I'm sharing what I've learned the hard way. So hopefully you're taking this consideration and trying to avoid these pitfalls as well. And again, please comment your other thoughts as well. How much money will you charge when you play out? And how early do you want to get to the gigs? It sounds silly, but you got these people that are really late, and you got to tell them, hey, you may want to tell them earlier time because they're just late type of people. But you need to lay this out because that can really get people really frustrated, angry. I was here early. I brought in all the drums. You lead singer, you came in so late. This is ridiculous. Have respect, set a time, have everyone go there. How much you're going to charge is huge. That should be decided because people are going to have their different things, and you're going to have to subtract. If you have, like, say, we used to have a band practice space, as I mentioned. So if we made so much money, we'd automatically get subtracted what we needed for rent, etc. You got to work all that out. But, unfortunately, money can cause issues. So that was it, people. And again, there's a lot more little details and different things, but I wanted to give it at a level where it was easier to kind of write down or to know a checklist that can help you prevent at least some of the major pitfalls that I've seen over the years and other people's have experienced. But again, it's not just about me. I want to hear about other musicians out there that are listening to this or people that are involved, and put your knowledge, put your thoughts. What were some additional things that you ran into? Put it out there because, we want people to be successful in their music endeavors. And I just want to say thank you so much for listening to this. And I hope it was very helpful. And I will catch you next time. See you then. I elevate.